Welcome to our 7th webinar in our 9-part series of the End of Life Symposium. Today's focus is on cinema at the end of life. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce to you a very inspiring and talented physician. She serves as the chair and course director for the End of Life Symposium, Dr. Chandana Banerjee.
Thank you, and welcome everybody to the End of Life Symposium webinar series. We have an exciting webinar today for you, and it is with completely pleasure that I say that this is the last of the humanities part of the End of Life webinar series. As you know, the End of Life Symposium is divided into 3 sections: humanities at the end of life, clinical aspects at the end of life, and medical aid in dying. And today's webinar will focus on multiple aspects of each of those. Our panelists today, it gives me great honor to introduce to you Dr. Mera. Dr. Mera is an Alpha Omega Alpha Medical Honor Society graduate of Loma Linda University School of Medicine in Southern California. After completing a pediatric residency and fellowship in Toronto at the Hospital for Sick Children, he returned to California and practiced pediatrics and pediatric oncology for multiple years in various clinical and executive positions. In 2014, while at Cambia Health Solutions, Dr. Mera built the nation's first palliative care program that got the attention of Capitol Hill and convinced CMS to address a number of issues around reimbursement for end-of-life care. Currently, Dr. Mera is Chief Medical Officer at Votive Health, a serious illness network manager focusing on palliative care and hospice. He is also a board member of Compassion and Choices. Most recently, Dr. Mera wrote and executive produced a film called Here Awhile. He will discuss his journey writing the story and discuss with us key elements of his film today in the seminar. Dr. Katherine Morris is an American Cancer Society-funded surgeon scientist with over 15 years experience as a surgical oncologist. She trained in general surgery at Oregon Health and Science University with specialty training in surgical oncology at Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center. Dr. Morris was featured in the Sundance Grand Jury Award documentary, How to Die in Oregon. After moving to the University of New Mexico, she continued to advocate for the rights of terminally ill, mentally competent adults to access medical aid in dying if they choose to do so. As a plaintiff in Morris versus Brandenburg, she petitioned the New Mexico courts to affirm this right. After an initial favorable court opinion, the New Mexico Supreme Court overturned the decision and referred the matter to the state legislature. Since then, she has testified to lawmakers in support of the Elizabeth Whitefield End-of-Life Option Act. In 2016, she was recruited to the University of Oklahoma Health Sciences Center, where she leads the Department of Surgery Research Program as Vice Chair of Academic and Research Development. Without further ado, I'd like to hand this off to Dr. Csaba Mera and his colleague, Dr. Kate Morris.
Thank you very much, Dr. Banerjee. At this point, we just would like to confirm that neither Dr. Morris or myself have any kind of disclosures. And with that, we will get started. This is the trailer to the movie for those of you who may not have had the opportunity to watch it.
I do need to ask you, I need to verify one more time whether or not this is really something you want to do.
It is.
I remember.
Hey.
The place where I was born.
I know I should have called.
How long has it been?
Way too long.
How long are you staying?
Oh, God, you know what? I'm actually not really sure yet.
Are you ill?
It started last year, and then it just spread all over the place. My liver, my lungs. I'm so sorry, Michael.
What's this? When were you planning to share this with me?
Let me explain.
Okay.
I long to wander in the wild.
You don't get to show up, make nice, smooth it all over with me, and then just off yourself.
Are you kidding me?
Go drifting back.
This is really hard for me, and I need your support.
Glories grow.
want to be able to say goodbye with a clear head to the people that I love. And I want them there with me when wherever.
Yes.
To my sister, I'm so happy you came back.
So with that, we'll get started. Dr. Morris and I will cover some basics about our training and our practice. You heard some of that from Dr. Banerjee. As she mentioned, after I completed my training at Loma Linda in Southern California, I actually did about 8 years of emergency medicine following my internship, and then decided to go back to my first love, which was pediatrics, and went up to Toronto, did general pediatric residency and pediatric hemonc fellowship at one of the world's most amazing pediatric training programs at the University of Toronto. In practice, as I mentioned, I did emergency medicine at Loma Linda. I started the residency program there. Then I became the director of the Loma Linda Emergency Department and Regional Trauma Center. And then after completing my pediatric training in Canada, I returned to California and practiced peds and peds hemonc in a number of different settings, including Cigna, University of California at Irvine, where I was an assistant professor, Children's Hospital of Orange County. And then in the mid-90s, when Cigna sold off all the staff model clinics, where I had led a number of, led the pediatric department as well as 11 of the regional clinics, I decided to stay on with Cigna in the physician executive role. So that's when I switched kind of my career to physician leadership, and had a number of opportunities at Cigna, at Pacific Care. Then I went up to Portland, Oregon, where I joined a regional health plan called MODA Health, where I built all of their medical management programs. After 10 years, moved over to Cambia, which is a 3 million life Blue Cross Blue Shield health plan in the Pacific Northwest. And then while I was at Cambia, I, along with Tori Fields, built the nation's first health plan-based palliative care program. And then after about 5.5 years, I came back down to Southern California. I reconnected with Tori Fields, who had worked as building the Blue Shield of California palliative care programs. And I am now the Chief Medical Officer at Votive Health, based here in California. I also have joined the board of Compassionate Choices, and I look forward to both of those wonderful experiences. And at this point, I'd like to hand it over to Dr. Morris to tell us about her background and her training and her clinical experience. Dr. Morris.
Thank you so much. I'm so honored to be a part of this. I hope I'm getting in under the wire with the Wi-Fi. So my training was summarized beautifully by Dr. Banerjee. And I think the main point of the timing of my training is that it very much tracked with the Oregon Death with Dignity law. I started my third year of medical school in Oregon Health and Sciences when the law first came up for a vote, and it made a lot of sense to me and it really fit my values. So because of this, I was among the 51% of Oregonians who voted yes. In 1997, there was an attempt to overturn the law, and I was an intern in general surgery at that time at Oregon Health and Science, and I voted with 60% of the population to affirm the law. Attorney General John Ashcroft attempted to have it overturned, and the Supreme Court overturned that attempt in 2006, solidifying the legality of the law in Oregon. And at that time, I had just completed my fellowship training in surgical oncology at Memorial Sloan Kettering and opened a surgical oncology practice at Legacy Health Center in Portland, Oregon. And my practice, if we can advance the slide. Thank you, sorry. Poor Dr. Mera is manning the slides for me. I practiced in Portland, Oregon for 5 years, and then an opportunity at the University of New Mexico came up, and it was a chance to expand my research efforts with the support of a university campus. So I took the job and moved to Albuquerque. After 6 years there, my lab and I were recruited to the University of Oklahoma Health Sciences Center, where I was able to develop more of a leadership role in research and teaching. And it's been a wonderful move so far. Along the way, I met Cody Curtis in the How to Die in Oregon video or movie when I was practicing in Portland, Oregon. When I met her, she had come to me with a large right liver cholangiocarcinoma that was resectable based on preoperative imaging. And I liked her immediately. She was educated and she was funny, she was kind and she was thoughtful and she was realistic. And I don't want to get out of order here, so I'll ask Dr. Mera if we're at the point to turn it over to him yet.
It is indeed. So I'm going to, at this point, go through briefly the journey that led to making this film. So there were quite a few events in my life over the years that culminated in my desire to write this film. First of all, my mom, when I was 15 years old, she was suffering from severe depression, and she committed suicide on her second attempt. It was a very painful experience as I tried to get my head around it, but that's when I started thinking about the issues of life and death and trying to make sense of the choice that my mom had made. And I could not help wondering if there was something I could have done to help her stay with us longer. I imagined that other people in similar circumstances go through the whole list of whys and what ifs. Fast forward to my med school and residency and fellowship training, and here my observations were that there was the interactions between the attending physicians from whom I was learning really had quite a wide range. The range was soberingly wide from what appeared to be aloof, guarded interactions to warm, caring, empathetic engagement. And I quickly decided that what I wanted to be as a physician in practice was to be empathetic and to engage with patients in that manner. In the emergency department, there were quite a number of opportunities to engage with patients and families in a wide range of end-of-life clinical circumstances, trauma, unresponsiveness, acute medical conditions, and the final days of serious illness. In this setting, as a teacher of residents rotating through the emergency department, I had the opportunity to promote the caring, empathetic approach. It certainly brought out the best in them, and they were grateful for it. My pediatric oncology practice, although most of my patients responded well to treatment and stayed cancer-free, there were a few who did not fare well. The experience with one little angel and her family has stayed with me over the years. After exhausting all possible treatments, I had to tell the parents that there was nothing else that a sweet 4-year-old angel could be treated with, and that she would soon die. But I explained to them that they have a couple of options. One is we could go into the hospital, have IVs and all the hospital stuff, or with some encouragement, they chose another option, which was to take her home. I gave them some very strong medicine because the child was in quite a bit of pain from the expanding leukemia that she had. And I visited them at home. She died peacefully a couple of weeks later in her mother's arms. And the parents were so grateful that this is how their little angel departed. I continued as a pediatrician for the little girl's younger sibling. My dad, in his last few years, he went through a steep downward journey into dementia. And along with it, he started to develop kidney failure. He had an acute episode, ended up being admitted to the hospital, and I was informed that he had been admitted because of an acute episode, and they wanted to ask, the doctor called me and asked if they should start dialysis and if they should correct his electrolytes and so forth. However, several years before, when my dad was still clear-headed, he completed an advance directive and made me his healthcare proxy. So when I was asked about all these interventions, I declined on his behalf. I once again declined even the electrolyte correction, and instead asked him to make him comfortable. He died a few days later. I had him cremated and later on buried his ashes in a beautiful place of nature along with the ashes of his dear second wife. When I was at Cambia, as I mentioned previously, I worked with Tori Fields, who's now the founder and CEO and president of Votive Health. And we built the nation's first palliative care program that's health plan based. And that's why it got quite a bit of attention on Capitol Hill and with CMS. And then an artist friend from who I had bought several paintings, she, at the age of 37, developed inoperable metastatic colon cancer. She lived in another state, but we stayed connected, and she had no access to the option of ending her suffering at the end of her life. So all of these, during the 15 years when I lived in Portland, I was aware of the Death with Dignity Act. I was also aware of the medical aid in dying laws in other developed nations. The Oregon statute was reasonable, and there were physicians who were agreeable to participate in helping patients avoid suffering with terminal illness to their very last breath. So with all the experiences over the years dealing with end-of-life issues and the recent death of my artist friend, who did not have access to medical aid in dying, I went into a screenwriting frenzy. I had taken screenwriting and movie production previously. I went into a screenwriting frenzy and wrote the script to Here Awhile in 10 days. After I completed the script, I connected with Compassion and Choices to make sure that get their input on the various elements of the film. I watched the award-winning documentary, How to Die in Oregon, which Dr. Morris will talk about in just a bit, and also reached out to Dr. Morris for her consulting expertise on both colon cancer and in a young adult, and her experience with medical aid in dying. So I brought on my good friend Tim True as a co-writer and as a director of the film. Tim is an excellent actor and a theatrical director. Within 6 months, we brought on our line producers and a wonderful production team. We were so fortunate to get an amazing cast, and all three of these well-known actors came on board because they absolutely loved the script. We shot the film. Let's go on to the next slide. Oh, there we go. So we shot the film in Portland, Oregon, in 18 days, which is kind of a record. Well, they were long days, 16-hour days. We went through 3 rounds of post-production to fine-tune the various elements of the film over about 12 months. Then for 6 months, we participated in various film festivals, and we actually won one of them, the Omaha Film Festival, in March 2020, which is interesting because Nebraska does not have any kind of medical aid in dying law, but people seem to be quite interested in this story. The movie was released in the United States on the major platforms, as you can see there, in June 2020. In October, it was released in the United Kingdom, Great Britain, and we're looking at New Zealand and Australia right now. This has been a whirlwind, wonderful experience. And at this point, I would like to ask Dr. Morris to take over and tell us about her experience with Cody Curtis and How to Die in Oregon documentary.
Thank you so much. I apologize for getting a little out of order there. So I was talking about meeting Cody Curtis when I was practicing in Portland, Oregon, and I had been practicing for about 3 years at the time when I met her, and she came to me with a large right liver cholangiocarcinoma that was clearly resectable based on preoperative imaging. As I mentioned, she was a very charming individual, and anyone who's seen this film knows that. She was highly educated, she was super funny, she was very kind and very graceful, and she was also very realistic. She wanted more time with her family, and it was so clear from the beginning of our first meeting that quality of life was equally important as the time with her family that she was trying to buy. I'd been caring for her for about 18 months when the cancer recurred. And for those in the audience who aren't in medicine, cholangiocarcinoma is notoriously resistant to current chemotherapies. We can get decent outcomes for patients when it is surgically removable, but if it recurs, our current therapies just aren't highly effective. Ms. Curtis had a graduate degree in biomedical sciences, and she knew this data all too well. When I told her the findings, she told me that she would be using the Oregon law, and she asked me to be the prescribing physician. In retrospect, I should have known this was a possibility based on having known her over those 18 months, but at the time I was both surprised and quite honestly terrified. While I had long supported the concept of aid in medical dying, it had been an intellectual decision when I was voting on those ballot initiatives. I'm a surgical oncologist, and we're generally involved in the early phases of cancer care, so I just didn't see this coming to be asked to be a prescribing physician. Thankfully, she heard the hesitancy in my voice, and she told me to take time to think about it. And then with her usual wry voice said, "Not too much time." And after a long, difficult weekend involving a lot of hard conversations with my family, I decided that I was her doctor and she was asking for my help. So I said yes. It remains the most difficult decision I've had to make in my career. She threw another curveball at me when she told me she was participating in a documentary on the subject. I am not somebody who likes a camera pointed in my direction, but it was clear how important it was for her to be able to tell her story. So I agreed to talk to the director off camera, and I learned that he had been working on this project for several years and hadn't been able to get a physician to go on camera on the record. I agreed to a voice-only interview, and I said, okay, we'll go ahead and film her clinic visits, which was her wish. But I just wasn't able to discuss that decision to prescribe on camera. After feeling too perky to use the medications on the date that she'd planned, she did well for several more months, and then unfortunately her condition turned for the worse in the winter of 2009. She called me on a very cold Friday evening in December and told me that she was suffering now more than she had intended, and she planned to use the medications the following Monday. She asked me to be there, and I was. It was beautiful, it was tragic, it was heartbreaking, and it was life-affirming. I'm going to be processing that experience for the rest of my days. I didn't become an activist for this cause, however, until the following weekend. The memory with the Curtis family after during her using the medications was very fresh in my mind, and it was quite raw. I was watching TV with my husband when channel flipping brought us to an interview on a public access cable station with a former medical school professor of mine with whom I tangled in training. He was a staunch Roman Catholic practitioner, and he refused to prescribe even birth control pills. He was discussing the Oregon Death with Dignity law in a way that I thought was very callous and inaccurate. And he stated that there was physicians who did nothing other than go out there and prescribe these medications and made their career based on that. And my husband tried to change the channel really quickly, but by that point I was already rage crying. And so I decided at that time that I needed to go on camera and talk about this decision in this movie, and I called the director the next week. So that is the story of how I got involved in this documentary, and it was a truly remarkable experience in my life. Dr. Csaba, I'm sorry, I am having trouble. Are you hearing me all right? Good.
Yes, you're
good. I apologize. I am having technical difficulties today. I was truly honored to be able to consult on Here Awhile, and it was really a remarkable experience. I was a bit intimidated to talk to Ms. Camp on the phone. I think that certainly a Zoom call with a Hollywood star was not in my normal realm of action. However, I really am having technical difficulties. We were able to Zoom call, and she immediately made me very comfortable. And I was truly struck by her desire to get the role right, to be medically accurate, and to do justice to what patients can suffer. We discussed physical manifestations of bowel obstructions, and it was an unusual experience, but it didn't feel awkward thanks to her passion for the role and the fact that she really wanted the story to be accurate and to be well done. It meant a lot to me to have the ability to describe what my patients went through and to have somebody want to portray that accurately. And I couldn't be more proud to be a small, tiny part of this film when I saw it. It was a tough issue, and it touches on medicine and spirituality, philosophy, and humanity. And it forces us all to confront our own limited time on the planet. It has had a very powerful effect on my life. One of the things I'm most thankful for in Here Awhile is that I think sometimes artistic portrayals of death and of cancer do us an injustice in our culture. We're most commonly shown people who look really sick and cachectic and weak and wasted so that we can see themselves as other than us quite easily. We can distance ourselves. oh, they smoked, or they drank too much, or they didn't take care of themselves. And I have to confess, I've had these thoughts myself, despite doing this every day and much evidence to the contrary. These two remarkable women on this picture are evidence to that contrary. The woman on the right is my sister at my wedding 2 days before being diagnosed with an aggressive breast cancer at age 39. She told me she felt bulletproof before this. The woman on my left is putting on a brave face at a fundraiser for a sick nephew 1 day after learning she had stage 4 colon cancer at 48 and before she told her 3 children of this news. Thankfully, they're both still with us decades later due to unusually great responses to modern medicine. But both know how fortunate they are, and both have told me how important it was to have good quality of life as a guiding principle for them as they went through their treatment options. My sister, who now lives in California, has told me in no uncertain terms that she needed that option of aid in dying available to her if her disease was not able to be treated. I'm so grateful for Ms. Camp's portrayal of a young person with cancer in Here Awhile, because I think this film will reach many people, and it helps remind us of the gifts contained within considering our own fragility, right as we are now. Thank you so much for letting me be a part of this seminar.
Thanks very much, Dr. Morris. At this point, I'm going to go through just briefly some of the key elements of the movie, Here Awhile. So the movie starts out where Anna comes home and reconnects with her estranged brother, Michael, younger brother, Michael. And we find out that what happened in the past is that she was a very tough, very supportive big sister. But when she came out as gay, her dad threw her out of the house. She struggled, she was homeless for a while, but she was a brilliant artist, and she actually started selling her art and met the love of her life, and they moved to Salt Lake City. And in the meantime, she tried to call home several times, but Dad just hung up. And Michael was kind of stuck taking care of Dad, who then eventually went downhill pretty fast with early dementia, genetics, and too much booze. After a few days, Anna breaks the news to Michael that she is sick, that she has inoperable metastatic colon cancer. She's gone through chemo and nothing has helped. It's just gotten worse. And at first, Michael asks, if this wasn't happening, would you really be here? And then later, he finds this little brochure on the Oregon Death with Dignity Act and has a little bit of a freak out because he can't believe that she came home and now she wants to take her life. And so they have quite a few uncomfortable exchanges. He struggles with this whole issue. He even asks a friend for clinical trials that would address her situation. She explains to him that most of these that the ones that he brought were first phase clinical trials, which really which often don't have very good results, and you go through a lot of misery. They stay connected. He struggles, and they have a chat about their mother, who on her second attempt committed suicide, and they recollect how they as young kids made a little book for her with all sorts of fun things in there called Reasons to Live, and they put this on her bed where she sort of hung out, just feeling terrible. And then she finally, on the second attempt, committed suicide. And in this scene, Michael says that he thinks that she was being selfish, and so Anna says, well, do you think I'm being selfish? And he says, well, we all have some pain we have to live with. And the point here is that there are so many people that believe that dignity at the end of life is suffering, and that should not be the case. In this one scene, they bury their dad in a beautiful place of nature, and this was their concept around resolution and forgiveness. Finally, Michael understands what and feels empathetic for what she's going through and agrees to support her. Gary, their quirky next door neighbor, has a little exchange with her where he explains that he thinks that the end of her life deserves respect, even if it's an answer he doesn't really understand. And that's a key element. There are a lot of people who just don't get the idea that people should be allowed to do this, but they still need to support them and love them. The final discussion with the doctor, when she asks, "Are you sure?" is where she openly explains that that once they've gone through the sort of the process and the steps, and the next thing is getting the prescription, there are a number of people who choose not to fill the prescription. There are people who fill the prescription but choose not to take the medicine. And even in Cody's situation, she sort of put it off for a little while because she was feeling pretty good at the time. So this is about choice, about the choice not to suffer to your last breath. Then the preparing of the medicine, they pull apart the 100 capsules of barbiturate or acecanol, and it's mixed with juice or soda, and then she has to drink that whole thing down and keep it down. Before she takes the medicine, about an hour before, she will take a couple of pills to keep her from throwing up the medicine. So that's kind of the procedure. And then finally, in this scene, just before the last scene, she recites this gorgeous poem by Mary Lee Hall. And this is where the title of the movie came from. "If I should die and leave you here a while, be not like others sore undone, who keep long vigils by the silent dust and weep." For my sake, turn again to life and smile, nerving thy heart and trembling hand to do something to comfort weaker hearts than thine. Complete these dear unfinished tasks of mine, and I perchance may therein comfort you. The last scene in the movie, there's a beautiful song by Nora Meyer called Bluebird. And after the Q&A, if you want to just hang around, you can actually watch it's just under 2 minutes. You can watch it and listen to this gorgeous song. And at this point, I will hand it over to Dr. Banerjee so that I can regain a little composure and she can respond to some of the Q&A.
Absolutely. Thank you, Csaba, and thank you, Katherine. One thing I will say before heading to the questions is that, the beauty of this movie is that it portrays things like they are for most people that experience it. It does not glamorize death. It does not glamorize medical aid in dying, but rather it normalizes it and really shows how normal families go through these experiences, go through these issues, go through the frustration, the anger, the grief, and really brings it to light for others to see. There are so many movies out there that are amazing on end of life, whether it's medically dying or other aspects in end of life. And one of the beauties of this film, I feel, that makes it stand apart from the others, it's that you will relate to almost every character in this movie. You can see yourself in this movie. And that's the beauty of this film at the end of life. So having said that, I'm going to take a few questions from people that have posted online. And this one's for Dr. Mera. And actually for Dr. Morris, can either one of you speak to the length of time the character Anna had between drinking the juice, which contained the medication, and when she began to fall asleep before dying? Thank you.
Well, I would defer to Dr. Morris on this because she has had experience in this. In general, the information that I got from talking to Dr. Morris and others is that it can actually be anything from half an hour to an hour to several hours. But I would ask Dr. Morris to say a few words.
Yeah, so, my experience with Cody Curtis was that she took the medication and was quite lucid for approximately 15, 20 minutes, and then drifted off to sleep after smiling and saying, "Oh, the room's spinning." And she kind of laughed and said, that's not usually a good thing. And then she said she loved you to her husband and to her children and her parents who were with us. And then she very quickly lost consciousness. And it took about 3 hours for her to go from the loss of consciousness to death. And my understanding of the data from Oregon is that's a pretty normal experience in this case.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Another audience question was asked. While I understand your goal to have someone portray a young cancer patient, so audience does not always expect a weak and fragile body to be a late stage cancer patient, the optics may add to the argument for those who are opposed to medical aid in dying because it may seem more as a suicide. I feel the role of Anna could have looked much weaker at the end. Dr. Mera and Dr. Morris, would you be commenting on that? Would you be able to clarify?
Well, I would defer to Dr. Morris because she has personal experience and in this. And I would also say that I've had pediatric oncology patients who were teenagers, and they did not look like they were going to fall over, and they had widespread metastatic disease. We'd exhausted all the treatment. So yes, this is unfortunately a misunderstanding. I did this on purpose in this film because the idea is I didn't want to portray somebody who was just like, looks like they could barely walk and they were cachectic, because then people say, oh yeah, I understand that person should be allowed to do this. I think this is the challenge that people need to understand. So that I will hand over to Dr. Morris.
Definitely, it's such a challenge. We see we see young people with unfortunately very advanced stage cancers not infrequently. And part of the reason I wanted to share the picture of my sister and also my beloved patient that I showed, we have permission from both, but part of the reason I wanted to share those pictures is those women were both very, very sick and very, very close to dying when those pictures were taken. And so I agree that it could be a concern as far as optics, but in the end of the day, it's unfortunately reality. And so I do think it was important to show that and to remind us all that we're all at risk so that we know to live while we're here.
I should also mention the little girl that I mentioned previously, the 4-year-old who had exhausted all treatment and she was going to go home. She looked like a normal 4-year-old. She had she was a little bit pale because of the leukemia, but it was causing a lot of pain. It was expanding in her bone marrow. It was in her liver, but she didn't look like she was going to fall over. And so I think that's a point of clarity that needs to be kept in mind.
Absolutely, thank you. One comment that was made that I do want to read out to both of you is someone said, very impressed and wonder how both doctors do self-care with all the work they do. So given that, maybe I will ask Dr. Morris and Dr. Mera, can you give us one thing you both do for self-care that may help the audience?
I'm laughing because I'm still a work in progress where self-care goes, but the things that help me through are my family and running frequently. If I do not run, I go a little bananas.
I've had a lot of stuff happening in my life, and I always do a little bit of thinking about, yes, that was not pleasant, but here are the good things in my life. So sort of refocusing, that's kind of what I do. Plus there's this wonderful t-shirt, I don't know if you've seen it. It says, crying is cool.
Fantastic. That's great. Thank you. One audience member asked, can you talk about the responses to the film? So Dr. Mera, I will pose that question to you.
We've had some really good reviews on Amazon Prime where viewers will do a 5-star rating. It's a 4.3 or something. On IMDb, it's 5.4, 5.5, which out of 10, which sounds like it's low, but it isn't. Some of the greatest blockbusters, multi-million-dollar movies are in the 4s and 3s, and so that is actually, we consider that a pretty decent score. On Rotten Tomatoes, it's around 70%. And then the actual reviews, and I've collected a number of reviews. The vast majority, I would say 85% of the reviews were very positive. The ones where there was criticism were around some of the things that we've talked about, which is, it's obvious this person doesn't agree with the whole concept, or Anna Camp looks too healthy, and those kind of things. But in general, there've been some very thoughtful and really very much appreciated reviews on the positive side.
Wonderful. Thank you. One of the other questions was, someone said that his wife and him watched the movie last night, and they said beautiful in all caps. They said it seemed like the doctor in the part, "Are you sure?" saying the part, "Are you sure?" seemed very hesitant and stiff. Can you speak to that?
I think actually Dr. Morris did a really nice job of addressing sort of the personal conflict the physician will have, even if they understand and agree in making this decision. And part of the physician's role is absolutely making sure that they present the fact that you don't have to fill a prescription, you don't have to take the medicine, because this is not about you going home and committing suicide. This is about you having a choice not to suffer to your last breath. Dr. Morris, maybe you could remind us about your experience with COVID.
I think it's very important to verbalize, I think, the fact that this is a choice, and the level of affirmation that I saw with Cody when she was asked that question was quite dramatic. Also, the level of affirmation that I've seen from other patients that were portrayed in the film How to Die in Oregon was very adamant. But the question, I think, is important for the people that are with them, so that everybody really truly feels this is the choice of the patient. And I think that's very important for the survivors as well as the providers.
Thank you. One of the questions is on the music in the movie. And I will tell you, for those of you who have seen this, I personally have seen it twice now, or 3 times, I believe. And every time, I swear I'm not going to sit down with a box of tissues, and I always do. So it is something, if you do watch, I will recommend, sitting down with some tissues. And it is a touching film. And part of what also makes it touching in the whole idea of movies and cinema is the music that goes along with it. I think it's perfectly matched. So the question to you, Dr. Mera, is the music throughout the movie was lovely. How did you choose the music for the film?
So we had a wonderful line producer who lives here in Southern California, in the LA area, Deborah Smith. And she has connections throughout in the entertainment industry. And then we also had a composer who actually wrote some of the songs, and then we also chose and paid for the rights to about five songs. And what we do is we review the songs. We know what the scene is going to be about. We listen to the words. We listen to the tone of the song and how it goes. And so that's how that was throughout the movie. The very last song by Nora Meyer, she modified a song that she had previously composed, the Bluebird song. And it is so gorgeous, and the words to it are so perfect for the sort of last scene of the movie. And so she modified that. We orchestrated it, and so it's like a combination of different things like that.
Thank you. I know there were several questions here that talked about preparing the medications and the pills that you had to open to the as you prepared the cocktail. And as a physician, I'll tell you these that we will have another webinar in 2 months that specifically talk about the medications and the prescriptions around medical aid in dying. But I think at the time when this medical aid in dying medications were worked on, people used to use a medication called Seconal, and about 100 pills needed to be opened and dissolved into some solution. Consequently, Seconal became extremely expensive and unaffordable. And now there's a much different cocktail that's used that does not really involve opening up 100 pills. So for those of you that asked that question, we use various other medications for the cocktail, and it's much easier on the patient, actually. The other question that comes up is, how people look towards the end of their lives. And I think Dr. Mera and Dr. Morris have addressed this. And one of the comments was really very, very well said on the way people look before they die, or if they have a certain disease process. And the comment made was, during a recent and current discussion, this made them think of Chadwick Boseman, who certainly looked well until shortly before his death. So that was a comment made in this in the questions asked today, and so that we just want to understand that people don't necessarily look wasted or cachetic at the end of their life. Sometimes they look perfectly healthy on the outside. The other question that is posed for both doctors is, could both the doctors discuss what they say to people who do say that medical aid in dying is just assisted suicide?
I think what I would say is that this isn't, calling it assisted suicide is just sort of a twist on the nomenclature to make it sound negative. This isn't about assisted suicide. It's about giving people a choice not to suffer horribly till the last breath that they take. That's what it is. It's got all kinds of other names. I mean, in the literature, some people say that, some people say euthanasia, some people say physician aid in dying, but we're getting away from that because we don't need to have a physician there unless a patient asks, such as Cody. But this is medical aid in dying, meaning, yes, I respect I respect your life, I respect what you're going through, and I respect the fact that you should have a choice. So that would be my comment.
Dr. Morris?
I think the phrase assisted suicide to me, I think the phrase suicide to me really means somebody who is not actively in their dying process. And my experience with this law, and I think many physicians' experience with this type of law, is that this is a choice that people make when they are in their dying process. And it is about how and when they actually complete that dying process more than ending their life soon. And I also think that there has been a fair amount written in the literature from the psychiatry point of view that talks about the different effects on the families between somebody whose family member committed suicide and somebody whose family member used medical aid in dying, and they are profoundly distinct. And I can certainly speak to that, still being in contact with the Curtis family, and it's far and away different from a suicide. I hope that answers the question.
Thank you. Another question for Dr. Mera. I loved the character of the neighbor, Gary. Was there a particular reason you chose to make him so amazingly quirky?
Yeah, I love Gary. and Joe Lo Truglio, who played Gary, he's obviously been in a lot of things, but most recently Brooklyn Nine-Nine. He is an amazing, amazing guy. He did so much research, and I remember chatting with him after our first, when we had a table reading in Los Angeles, and he did it at a table reading, the actors sit at a table. We sit around and watch them. And he was like perfect. So this person he's on the ASD spectrum. He has significant Asperger's, significant obsessive compulsive disorder, as well as agoraphobia. And that's what that scene was, him jumping out of the car. There are a lot of themes that I sort of wove into this film, by the way. And this was because I also have a passion for respecting people who have challenges and who are trying to make their way in life. So it represents a combination of my youngest son, who's got some of these things. I have bits and pieces of some of these things, and also his character. I just wanted to show how a person struggling with all kinds of personal human issues can connect on a powerful emotional level on this very difficult decision. And in that one scene, which is on the cover of the movie, you know, where he very sort of objectively says, Webster's Online Dictionary says, blah, blah, blah. But then he says, you know, your life deserves, your end of your life deserves respect, even if it's an answer I don't understand.
Absolutely. Do you have any future plans or any plans for future scripts on palliative care subjects, Dr. Mera?
I might take a little break for something a little bit lighter. I was thinking of doing a movie called The Finn Chronicles with 4 dogs who talk to each other and do wonderful things in the neighborhood.
Okay.
But I actually have 2 other scripts. One is based on a book by an author from Portland, Oregon, and she is a death row investigator, an amazing book, and that's one. And then the other one, which I wrote in Portland before I came down here, and now I've rewritten, called Maddie and Anna, and it's about 2 teenage girls who become homeless out of a horrible home situation, how they try to survive, how an ER doc tries to help them out. So I thought it's time for something a little lighter.
Wonderful. One of the comments and questions, and I'll make this the last one because I do want people to take the 2 minutes to listen to that song that we will play at the end of this webinar. Is a question saying, and a statement saying, starting the film, we see the main character in silence, listening to the diagnoses. What struck me was how brave she was reacting to the news and how she was fighting her thoughts. It was very powerful and emotional. Why did you choose to do this segment in silence?
Because I wanted to make sure that people are connecting at a very human level. They can think whatever they want. They see that she's in a physician's office. They see that something horrible is being shared, and then she breaks down at the end. This was not written into the script. There were 2 or 3 scenes that were not written into the script, and I discussed with my director, Tim True, and we decided to put it in there. And this scene was actually like 10 minutes in, and then our editor said, you know, what do you think about putting it up front so that immediately you connect with Anna? And I think that makes it even more powerful. You just like, wow, what's happening here, kind of thing. So,
absolutely, thank you. The last comment, and then we will share the resources with you, after which we'll play the movie. But the comment was, the movie was just right and very watchable for such an intimidating topic. It was perfectly cast, appreciated the occasional humor, glad you did not insert religion, which made it universal. Thank you for making this important film. And with that, I would personally, as chair of this webinar series, I would like to thank Dr. Mera and Dr. Morris on behalf of City of Hope and the End of Life Symposium team. We absolutely cherish what you've done. And we look forward to more from you on this topic. So thank you both from the bottom of our hearts. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for letting me participate. Thank you.
For more educational opportunities or to reference today's recording, please visit us at cityofhope.org/CME. Please join us next month on April 1st when we will discuss palliative care emergencies and end-of-life care. Thank you for participating today, and we hope you'll join us next time.
Bluebird, come and rest your wings with me. Sing of sights unknown to me. Sing your sweet soliloquy. Bluebird, I used to soar above the waves. On my back the sun's warm rays. Night has fallen on those days. Fly me beyond these walls. Fly me beyond these walls. Bluebird, these bonds that tie me down won't break unless I fall to the ground. Bluebird, they have grown strong with time, and I couldn't break them if I tried. Bluebird, my spirit's broken, wings are tied. My eyes are raw from tears I've cried, and I can't find the strength to fly. Bluebird, these bonds that tie me down won't break unless I fall to the ground. Bluebird, they have grown strong with time, and I couldn't break them if I tried. Fly